Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. We are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hello and welcome everyone to episode 56 of the Porcupine Report. As always, I'm your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, and it is another beautiful week in the free state of New Hampshire. I will tell you, it is so nice. The snow is melting. We're on the cusp of spring being here. You can already smell it in the air, and it's nice when I look outside. I don't see snow covering anything anymore. But I am in southern New Hampshire. Maybe some of the folks in northern New Hampshire are still experiencing some snow. But it's nice. I personally love living in a place with all four seasons. It reminds me that I'm alive and that time is moving on. I can't imagine these folks living in Southern California where it's one season all year long, not to mention all the tyranny that comes with living in that state. A lot of our best free staters, actually, including our producer for this show, Renita, fled California and are making their home right here in New Hampshire, the number one state for freedom with such thriving and robust liberty communities. And to those of you who are part of that, thank you for being here. And for those of you who've yet to make the move, we are always encouraging you to come and visit, see what New Hampshire has to offer, both the state and the communities that are here. And of course, we have so many opportunities to come and visit, but two very big ones coming up in the very near future. The first is going to be this April 24th through the 27th. That's just barely over a month away. The New Hampshire Liberty Forum, where we are going to be exploring and conversing liberty for real. How do we take these ideas that have existed only in libertarian white papers for decades and bring them into the real world where real people live, where these ideas can promote prosperity and freedom for real people? That's been happening in New Hampshire from the school choice revolution to Second Amendment rights to the Bitcoin and crypto revolution taking place to so many other topics that we're going to be exploring at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. So if you don't have your tickets yet, I hope that you go to nhlibertyforum.com and grab your tickets. And you know what? A gift from me to you. I want to give you a discount code. 10% off your tickets if you use the discount code Granite Gulch. Granite Gulch, 10% off your tickets. Just a gift from me to you. I hope that you join us. It is not out of the question. Tickets are moving. It's not out of the question. We might sell out. So you're going to want to get your tickets soon. nhlibertyforum.com. And then, of course, just around the corner after that, we have the Porcupine Freedom Festival, June 16th through the 22nd. Our theme for this year is Taste the Revolution, where the New Hampshire Liberty Forum is going to be more of a conference, and we're discussing ideas. We're discussing how we advance liberty at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. We're going to be experiencing what it's like to live in a free society, if only for 1 week. So come and taste the revolution at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. I've told you about all the great speakers that are coming to both of these events. At some highlights from the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, we're going to have former Congressman Dana Rohrabacher talking about how he led the fight in Congress to defund the federal war on cannabis. We're going to be hearing from Sergeant Dan McKnight about the Defend the Guard effort to bring our troops home from foreign undeclared wars all across the country through state legislative efforts. We're going to be hearing from Bruce Fenton, one of the leaders of the Bitcoin revolution, who lives right here with us in New Hampshire, and so many other speakers. And of course, at PorcFest, we're so excited. Connor Boyack, the author of The Tuttle Twins, is coming out. Joel Salatin, who is one of the leaders in the food freedom revolution taking place in this country, he's coming to join us. Our old friend Scott Horton, director of the Libertarian Institute, and so many more. I can't name them all. So for the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, go to nhlibertyforum.com. You can see our whole list of announced speakers. For the Porcupine Freedom Festival, go to porcfest.com, and you can learn all the details there. Grab your tickets. And by the way, that discount code Granite Gulch, That works for both events. 10% off. Just a gift from me to you. Now, for today's episode, we're going to be talking with someone right here in New Hampshire who has been a leading voice for education freedom in our state. And she recently launched an organization called EdOpt, which is informing and helping to connect families in New Hampshire with the wide diversity of educational options that are available. We'll be learning a little bit more about that today. But I want to tell you a little bit about her. Her name is Jody Underwood. First of all, she's one of the very first people who I met at a potluck when I was first landed in New Hampshire and was making the move. I very much appreciated her, especially she's really also really great at. She's been helping a lot of our people publish their own works and their own books, which she's been doing for her husband as well, who's a prolific author here in the Free State. Her name is Jody Underwood, and let's welcome her to the show.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure's all mine, Jody. I know we've been talking about getting you on the program for a while, and I'm really glad that we were able to make it happen this week.
Thanks.
How are things up in Croydon? Do you still have snow up there, or is it melted away?
Yeah, there are some spots that there's still snow. Right back in the woods, it's got to be 4 inches in a couple of spots. The places that don't see the sun still have it, but really 2 days ago, most of the snow just went away. Starting to see grass and weeds and all the good stuff.
Anyway, I enjoy all 4 seasons, but it is nice that spring is here. I know that some of the folks with like Free State Skate, they've been doing like ice skating, every single week with Free State communities. I'm sure that they're a little sad to see the winter season end, but there's plenty of other things to do in the state. So I guess as we kind of get into our conversation here, I guess let's start, Jody. Could you tell everyone like a little bit more about your story, how you came to the Free State and to be involved in the Free State movement? And I know you've a long background in history in education. You have a PhD in education yourself, and I know you were on the Croydon School Board for over a dozen years. Tell us a little bit about your story and your journey here.
Sure. All right. So my husband and I, Ian and I, learned about the Free State Project a long time ago, but after the vote, and it was from Reason Magazine. And we thought, wow, that's a great idea. We had already sort of identified as libertarians for, a number of reasons. We hadn't even known the term, right, much before that. And we said, next time we're ready to go on an adventure, let's move to New Hampshire. And so we had a couple of friends. We were living in the Philadelphia area at the time, not where either of us is from. And honestly, life was pretty boring there. We weren't involved in politics at all. But we thought, let's do this. And the 4 of us decided we wanted to do this together. So we did. Neil and Emily Smith, who run Bardo Farm, which is where that potluck was that you came to that first time. And we toured around the western part of the state. Emily's from Vermont originally. Neil wanted to ski. We wanted a large property. We wanted to live off grid. And on our first trip up, we found our property and we were all just like, yeah, let's do this. So we did. That was back in 2007. Honestly, there weren't a lot of people here yet. In the first year, we met a bunch. Turned out Carla Garrick moved up like right down the road from us about 6 months after us. And there were a few other people. We met Mark Warden and Jason Sorens, who was in the state during that period because he was in and out. And we started getting involved with them. Mostly, we got used to living in New Hampshire for the first year. We got to know our property. We got to know people in town. Within that first year, I started going to school board meetings because, as you mentioned, everything about my life has been about education. I'm a learning scientist by profession. I've designed learning and assessment environments for many years, digital environments, I should add. So I'm sort of a tech person. And I just thought, let me see what I can do for, on the school side, because that just seems to be what I can do. And then by the end of that first year, I got appointed to the school board because somebody had left. They moved from town and you can no longer be on the board at that point. And then I got elected without any competition every time after that until the last time when I lost. And there's a long story about that we don't need to get into today. But if you want to read it, you can see the Croydon budget battle published by bareminimumbooks.com. Feel free to take a look. That's where my husband does all his writing. I just had to put that URL in there.
I think before I moved here, I heard like an NPR podcast, which of course had a very particular perspective on the whole thing. But anyway, I'm sure I'm sure we could talk for a whole hour just about all of that, and then we wouldn't be able to talk about anything else. So people can go find that independently.
Yes.
Well, and now you are you've started EdOpt. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What is the mission of EdOpt, and how is it helping people?
Sure. So Education Options, and both are legal names, EdOpt and Education Options. Our mission is to help families understand all of their education options in New Hampshire, and there's really a rich set of those options. I ran the idea by a couple of people at a local meetup, actually, an Upper Valley meetup, and about 15 people came to hear, this idea. And there were other people milling around as well, but these ones sat down with us, and after the presentation, they were like, yeah, let's do this. So it's like, okay, we have energy, let's go. And this was a year ago. So we really officially started in April of 2024. And I already said what the mission was, and so we took a very like hit the ground running approach, and we created a quick website, a minimum viable website, if you will, because we wanted to run face-to-face expos around the state that summer. So that's what we did. By July, we had a website up and running, not beautiful, but certainly functional. Not bad, I have to say, but still. And we ran 2 expos in August in the Upper Valley, which is where we live, and that's the Dartmouth-Sunapee region of New Hampshire. And we had about 10 to 15, we did 2 expos, 10 to 15 education providers from the region came. They included a micro school, a learning center. There were a couple of tables for homeschoolers, and Granite State Home Educators had a table at one of them. We had local private schools and religious schools and charter schools and community colleges, and all the different options really were there. They all felt it was very successful, and to advertise for it, to get the attendees to come, I handed out flyers at local farmers markets and art fairs. And we have a bunch of them over the summer, even in our small area. And I spoke to hundreds of families about it. So just by handing out flyers, and I have to say that almost every one of them were like, oh, what an interesting idea. Oh, what a great idea. This is across the aisle. People are getting more and more disillusioned with what the public schools are doing and how their kids are performing there, right? And there's a series of reasons as to why, and there's many different ones, aside from the academic performance or lack thereof going on in the public schools. There's also the values are different than what a lot of the families like, and they're they're not happy with that. And there's the age-old bullying, and the costs, and there's just the list goes on. So I was very encouraged that, again, this brought a lot of energy to us to see that there were so many people interested in this. So
yeah. So I guess I imagine I'm a new resident in New Hampshire. I imagine I've got small kids who are, we're starting to think about maybe the school year next year, and we don't know what the options are. Maybe we've never had kids in the school system before. And how would you advise me to explore the options that are available? What's kind of the first advice you'd give to someone?
Sure. I like to start from the homeschooling side, because I think that's the best thing for kids, is to be with their parents for as long as possible, honestly, especially at the young ages. So let me, what you're asking is good, but let me tell you a story about a family that did reach out to us. These weren't people planning for school, but they had one kid in school who was falling behind, and this is elementary, both kids, and one who was bored out of her mind, and she just didn't know what to do with them. And she thought, she said, I can't homeschool, and I live in the middle of nowhere. So it turns out, so I had a phone call with her. So, it turns out she lives a half hour from me, and there's a rich homeschooling community here, and she had no idea. So that piqued her interest. So I kept going down that path. I didn't know why she said she couldn't homeschool, but the interest intrigued me. So I talked to her also about homeschool co-ops where you get together with a few families and you sort of share the load. You might go on field trips with them to museums or parks, or, it could be academic or not. And maybe one family likes to, have science outings and another wants to do reading groups, or, whatever it is. And she was like, we can do that? She had no idea that the law allowed for it, as if you have to ask permission for these kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
And so then she was like, well, how do I find these families? So I got her on a Facebook group, which she was already on Facebook, which was a good thing. And she got into the homeschool group and she said, she made her statement, this is what I'm looking for. And within 2 hours, 4 families were like, oh, I live right down the road from you. Oh, I would love to do that. So she was well on her way. So that's sort of the direction I start from, is from homeschooling, homeschool co-ops, and then learning centers would be the next one. I've also conferred with other families who really need to drop their kids off. So I told them about Micah Studios, which is a learning club in Newport, which is the next town over from us. And yet again, that reaction, I had no idea. I can't tell you how many times I get to explain what learning centers are, because nobody knows what they are, but they exist. We have at least 32 all around the state. And they run, and you might be familiar with them, but they're very flexible and you can run them however you want. It's sort of an entrepreneurial idea, for people who are interested in doing their own. But you can have full-time all day, every day. You could have classes that are offered sometimes during the week. You can have, drop-off programs for a couple days a week. And then the price, the cost ranges accordingly. So it's very, very flexible.
I know we've had Latitude Learning featured on this program before. They'd be one of those those learning centers. Okay. I know it's kind of very impressive. The flexibility that exists there for families and how they do that. So there's, and I really appreciate you kind of breaking that down. I think certainly I hear from people all the time. They think homeschooling, I couldn't do that. And they just kind of imagine that it's going to be the one, you got to have a full-time at-home parent who is like responsible for teaching everything and this, and oftentimes people aren't aware of the co-ops that exist. I imagine, especially after COVID, it seems that there's been a surge in popularity of these co-ops as more and more families have been looking for alternatives.
Absolutely. But you also bring up another point, and that is the fears and misconceptions that people bring with them. They're like, I could never spend that much time with my kids, right? There's all sorts of things. We can't afford it and so on. They don't know that they can do homeschooling for, just a few $100s a year. They have no idea. Maybe that should be our tagline. They have no idea. I forget where I was going with that.
Well, we've talked about, I guess, homeschooling quite a bit. What are some of the other options that are available? I mean, there's homeschooling. Obviously, there's the government schools. I guess there's many different kinds of government schools. But how would you walk people through some of the other options that are out there too?
Sure. I mean, obviously, there's private schools. Some people like an alternative private school, like a Montessori. Or there's religious schools, and a lot of people like those too, and a lot of them are sliding scale. They're actually more inexpensive than the public schools. If you live in Croydon, actually, this is something that I shepherded through the legislature. We actually tuition out 2 private and religious schools. So a lot of people started moving here as soon as that happened. So that passed in 2017. So anyway, that's one option. But let's say you're at the high school level. There's a state program called Learn Everywhere that Frank Edelblu, the current commissioner of education, introduced to New Hampshire. And that basically says if you're already doing things outside of school, you can get credit in school for it. So if you take martial arts or flying lessons or art classes, or it runs the gamut. Even if you get tutored outside, as long everybody has to get certified to say that they're eligible to teach you, I guess, certified to teach you. But it's stuff you're doing everywhere, and you pay for it on your own, and you get some credits in your high school. So that's, if your kids aren't completely happy in high school, this is one way they can step outside of that. There's also the dual enrollment program that a lot of people actually know about. that you can take community college classes toward a degree and get credit in your high school for them too. And again, there's a few different programs for this. One of them is completely free, and the other costs so little as to be worth it. Because if you waited till after you graduate and start in the community college, it would cost you a lot more. So again, this is a way to get out of high school and start a career if you want. Of course, there's also things like apprenticeships and entrepreneurship as a teenager that parents can support, but a lot of these learning centers support them too, and some charter schools as well. So charter schools are all around the state. Also, some of them focus on this apprenticeship thing. They help these high school kids get apprenticeships in areas that they're interested in to see if that's what they want to do, right? To actually start their lives off. There's so many options.
Do you have a sense of where kind of New Hampshire ranks up in terms of the availability of options for families compared to other states people might live in the country? Is it, or I know you're New Hampshire focused. I don't know if you're analyzing what is going on in other states, but do you have a sense of where New Hampshire stacks up there?
Right. I am not analyzing other states. I see some things sometimes. I can tell you that New Hampshire has a few rules that you must follow if you want to homeschool your kids, but they're not there. That got reduced enormously back in 2012 when we had a very active, we still have an active homeschool community, but there were activist homeschoolers who got this law shepherded through the legislature. Michelle Lavelle gets a lot of credit for it. Pretty sure Kate Baker was involved, Doris Hohensee. Anyway, there were a whole bunch of people. And I'm sorry if I'm forgetting them, but
I'd love to know a little bit more. What were some of the requirements that were in place, and what was the change that happened in 2012?
I don't know what all the requirements were before, but I'll tell you where we are now, because that's really what's important.
Yeah.
So basically, you have to report one time that you're going to homeschool your kid. So when they, if they're young and you decide you're going to homeschool from the beginning, so that's when they turn 6 by the September of that year, right? So whatever year they turn 6, by that September, you have to tell somebody, and that somebody can be your local school district, it can be the State Department of Ed, or it can be a private school with certified teachers. So you never really have to report to the government in that case. So that's it. And it used to be that you had to report every year. So by only reporting once, we don't actually have a good gauge on how many families are homeschooling their kids. Because you can report once, but then send them back to school. That data isn't really shared either. Like that I don't know. You can send it back to, any kind of school, really. And then the second rule is that you have to either keep a portfolio or test your kid every year. But in reality, you don't actually have to share that with anybody. They say that you have to get a review by that organization that you reported to that you were going to homeschool, so that private school teacher could do that review for you. So again, you never have to report it to the government. I mean, that's one of the nice things for libertarians, right? Who really want to keep the government out of their lives as much as possible. So those are the two rules.
All right. I mean, those seem like, if there are going to be any rules imposed by the government, those seems like pretty easy ones to comply with.
They are, especially because if you're homeschooling, you're going to want to keep some kind of portfolio or testing anyway. If your kid wants to go to college, say, or even get a job and get that diploma, you want to sort of show evidence that they did enough work to get a high school diploma. And parents can self-diploma, is that a word? Self-diploma their kids. You can do that, or you can get some statement from the state if you want to. There are a number of ways of doing that. Though I should add, so I'm talking about independent homeschoolers here. If you take an EFA, then I'm going to restate that. If you are an independent home educator, and that's what it's called in the state laws, is a home educator. But if you take EFAs and homeschool your student, first of all, EFAs you can use for tuition to private schools or religious schools, or learning centers for that matter, but you have to officially homeschool your kid, right? If you go to learning centers.
Could we just for
EFAs,
I don't want to assume that everyone knows what an EFA is.
You bet.
Which could you tell folks what an EFA is?
Of course. In New Hampshire, they're called education freedom accounts. In many places around the country, they're called education savings accounts. And this is basically the state gives you some money to educate your kid, but you have to Well, in some cases, there's a couple of states that have universal EFAs. New Hampshire has a bill in this year to make it so anybody can get an EFA. But right now, it's you qualify by earning less than 350% of the federal poverty level, which is about $112,000 for a family of 4. Okay, so I hope they cleared that up, and thank you for calling me on that. And so, but the rules are a little different for EFA homeschooling families. They do have to test every year. You know what? I don't even know if they have to do a portfolio or not. I'm pretty sure they have to test, but portfolios could be possible. But they do have to share them with the scholarship organization, so they oversee all of that. And I and so they have a couple of more hoops that they have to go through. Here's one other difference. If you're an independent homeschooler, you actually can have your kids take classes in the local public school, whether they're on the sports teams or calculus or art or whatever. You have the right to, and every school board is supposed to have a policy to allow independent homeschoolers to do it. And they'll get some money from the state to support that, this adequacy money, which is how the state supplements the town's paying for school budgets. But if you're an EFA student, because you get that money directly from the state, you're not eligible for that kind of thing. Yeah.
Could an EFA family pay their local public school for access to like a particular extracurricular activity or something like that?
Probably that would depend on the district's policy, but yeah, I don't see why not. They could use their EFA toward it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I know there's been kind of disagreements within the education freedom community on I think what's a fairly substantive kind of policy question of does do EFAs create the conditions for government to kind of get their tendrils into not just the government schools, but into other areas where into homeschooling and private schools, and could down the road there be stricter requirements imposed on them. So anyway, I know that's an ongoing debate, and there are very good people on both sides of that debate who I think all have the best intentions for our kids. Are there any other kind of educational options we haven't talked about yet, or anything worth exploring deeper than we already have?
What a good question. So we also do online resources. That's one of the things we share. I don't think we have a full set of online resources because there are so many. I mean, we really start with a lot of the homeschool activities that you can do with your kids. So that shows families just the breadth of things they can do. But I think we about covered it. Charter schools, career and technical centers, that's another one that you could do. You could, take welding classes in your local tech center. A lot of people know about those too, though. They're spread around the state pretty well.
Let me ask you. I remember a question I was going to ask. So with homeschooling families, I know there's always always many misconceptions out there from families who don't homeschool. One question that often comes up a lot is, the ability for homeschool kids who went through homeschooling to be able to apply and get accepted to colleges if that's the path that they want to go down. What would you say to someone asking, if I homeschool my kid, should I worry about their ability to get into Harvard or wherever they want to go? I mean, heaven forbid they want to go to one of these, elite liberal institutions for some reason. But if they did want to, what information would you share with folks about that?
Well, I would certainly ask them to research the particular universities that their kids are interested in. But my understanding is that many of these top colleges have special paths for applications for homeschool kids, that they've had such good experiences with them as students that they like to get them. They're usually self-directed. They don't need a lot of support, and if the kids are really motivated to go there, they're probably going to do well, and they know that. So the thing is, like I said, You don't need that high school diploma, and you've never really needed it. I know I know somebody who just wanted to get out of school really young, and he was 16, and he applied to a college that he wanted to go to, and he didn't lie, and he got in, and then his school gave him like this degree to say, just get out of here. So if you're tough enough,
Yeah, yeah,
persistent enough, you can do what you want anywhere, really. I mean, you still have to qualify to get into the better schools, right? But
yeah.
yes.
Well, that's awesome. Now, as for I know you're going to be one of our 10 presenters at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum in our Liberty for Real dialogue series. And for those who don't know, I guess I'll tell folks the format that we're doing for New Hampshire Liberty Forum this year. We're going to have our main stage kind of with our traditional speakers and panels. And you'll be able to hear speakers, a lot of interesting speakers who will be talking for maybe 20 minutes, right? But we're also going to be having these 10 Liberty for Real dialogues. These are going to be 80-minute sessions with select presenters who have been exploring a particular challenge that stands in the way of us moving towards more freedom and liberty. And how do we overcome those challenges? And we have presenters like Jody, who is going to be presenting on an idea, presenting a solution, and then opening it up to brainstorming from the rest, from those who are participating, to give feedback and to talk through some of these ideas. And that's going to be the most interactive part of Liberty Forum. And these are going to be limited seating opportunities. So we certainly encourage people. And I will mention that our VIP ticket holders get priority to kind of pre-register for these and make sure that they get seats at these. I think are going to be very, very valuable dialogues. Jody, if someone were to sign up to be in your dialogue, which I believe we have scheduled for Friday of Liberty Forum,
Yeah.
what might people expect, and what are you looking forward to there?
Sure. So I'm changing the name from the one I previously submitted, by the way. It's still the same topic, but I like this name better. It's just called The Problem with Public Schools. I'll do that formally. Don't worry about it.
I'll make a note of it here because I'll have to update the speaker graphic for you.
Yeah.
And the
Thank you. I
problem with
appreciate
public
that.
schools. Okay.
Yep. And I will lay out the problems that people have with public schools, the solutions they've tried, some other solutions that probably people haven't thought of. Talk about what the goal of public school is, or goals that nobody has ever agreed on before. So how do they even know what they're doing if they don't really have a goal? And maybe that's why they've gone off in all these other areas. And then I'll talk about education options and what we've done and what we're going to do, which I haven't gotten to the going to do yet here. So we can talk about that after. Um, and our results and so on, and then open it up to discussion, inviting people to join us in our effort, take another one of the approaches that I put forth there that they can do it themselves. I really want to get feet on the ground working on this public school problem. How can we reach kids in public school to let them know that they have options in other places? Because as I said, they just don't know what their options are. And yeah, see where that goes. A lot of people are passionate about education and educating kids. So, let's see if we can get entrepreneurs out there to start new learning centers or micro schools. Or people want to join me in my effort. We have plenty of room for that. So, yeah, that's what I'm hoping for.
So tell me a little bit more from your perspective. I mean, obviously you were on your school board for 12 years, so you've seen and experienced kind of a lot with the public schools. What would you say? Like, I know that you're going to give like a long presentation on this, so I'm asking you for, I guess, a short version. But what would you say is the problem with public schools?
No, there's no single problem. It's just the
Yeah,
problem with public schools, right?
yeah,
I mean, I mentioned some before
yeah,
that more and more people just are showing their dissatisfaction with them. That's the problem.
yeah.
The problem is that they're a monopoly, and in New Hampshire, our state constitution says that we're not supposed to have monopolies. So maybe we can go at this legislatively to change what you can do with schools, why, maybe change mandatory attendance. So there's just so many possibilities that we can do to do things better. Yeah.
Does the I'm a big believer that systems respond to incentives, and whether it's a nonprofit or a government entity or a for-profit, like everyone's ultimately trying to serve their customers. The people who at the end of the day are the ones who really decide whether the system succeeds or fails. And it does seem oftentimes that in the public schools that the parents and families don't get treated like the customers. Who would you say like the public schools are responsive to?
Wow. Okay. So the parents aren't the customers. They're not paying. Why are they the customers? The taxpayers are really the customers. The parents are the beneficiaries. And if we start talking about it differently like that, then maybe things would change. I mean, you know that a lot of parents are not respected by the schools, right? Schools hide information about their kids. There was a case last year that a teacher took off from school and took a child into Vermont, I think, to get an abortion without letting the parent know. Excuse me?
Wow, I hadn't
Yeah,
heard that. That's
pretty extreme example. Yeah.
it.
Um,
What was now? I'm just curious. Like, I don't know if you know all the details there, but was that teacher disciplined in any way, or was
I
this just
I don't remember. I think so. I think so
okay?
afterwards, but yeah,
Okay,
I don't remember the details. I just remember that part of the story.
wow. I
Yeah,
mean, that is
fancy
shocking.
that. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. It's shocking.
yeah.
So the question you just that you mentioned, customer, it's to think about who is really the customer, right? And why. And taxpayers, they don't go to school board, district meetings where the vote on the budget and how things go. You don't get a large majority of them because they feel shamed that they are just concerned about their money. I'm sure they all want the kids to get educated, but they think they can be educated for a smaller amount of money. And I know they're right because I know that data. It doesn't matter how much you spend per kid on school, they get the same mediocre education everywhere. But they're shamed if they speak up, and so they tend not to go. So we need to empower them to go to these district meetings and speak their minds and feel confident about it. So that's one thing.
If
We-
if if the taxpayers in mass aren't showing up for these town meetings where the school budgets are being voted on, and families are being disregarded in a lot of these decisions, who are the ones who are making these decisions on these budgets? Like, who are the groups? Is it the teach? Is
the
it just like the
parents, it's parents who have a biased opinion of what the schools should do. They want as much
mm,
money as possible spent on their kids. So they
yeah,
vote on it. But our administrators, they're the experts. They said that this is the
right,
budget they need, and they said that they can't take out any of the money. So therefore, I'll vote for this. That's a common
yeah.
theme
So
that
it's
you will hear.
so it's a dispersed cost, concentrated benefit problem, and also maybe some misleading that parents thinks that more money does translate into a better education, but
Of course they do. Yep.
uh,
But let's talk about incentives for a
yeah,
second. So I love that you brought that up. So the incentive to schools is in the money that they get from the state, this adequacy money that I mentioned, and adequacy funds are given to a state based on the number of kids in attendance the year before. So basically, it's seat time. So that's the motivation then. They get the most money if they get the most kids in seat. So that supports mandatory attendance, and so on. It's 180 days a year. And anyway, so maybe we change that incentive and
mm,
schools will perform better. Maybe the incentive is that you may not promote a child unless they're reading at grade level. That would change a lot.
mm.
Um,
So the incentive for the schools is to have kids' butts in seats
that's
rather
it.
than actually having, you know, outcomes for
That's right.
those kids that
It
that
is
that are
not about outcomes at all, that's
yeah,
right. They're
yeah.
required to test them. In New Hampshire, it's 3rd through 8th grade and then 11th grade. Those are the standardized tests that the state provides. But they don't have to perform in any particular way. And for the kids, it's not even a high stakes test. They just have to take a test. Many of them don't care. So maybe they're not even performing well on the tests and they really can perform well. Who knows? We don't know. How can we find out? We
Mm.
can't. Not the way it's done now. It'd be nice if we could find out because there is very little accountability from
Mm.
that side in what's going on in the schools these days.
From a public policy perspective, um, if you I don't know if you were in the state legislature and you had the control to change particular state policies around education, is there any particular thing that you would like tackle first?
These two things, I would change I would change the name. You call it adequacy money, but it's about seat time. Call it seat time funding. I mean, at least name it what it is, right?
Yeah. Rather than propaganda terms, call it what it is.
Yeah. So I mean, that would be just, call things by their true names. It would take us a long way. But
Is
mandatory attendance, see, that's one I like, or grouping by ability rather than age, right?
mm,
That's another one. Just because you're 7 years old or 9 doesn't mean you should be grouped with all those other kids. What if you're, at a 10th grade level in reading and you're just going to be kept behind because you're traveling with kids your age? Like, that just seems unfair,
yeah. I know I've seen a lot of situations where it seems like the class is being taught to the lowest common denominator, whoever is the slowest, and so the faster kids are getting bored and not being challenged. And now I'm curious about this the mandatory attendance. So if the law for mandatory attendance was repealed and we weren't like enforcing truancy, what do you think would happen then?
I don't know, maybe high schoolers would get jobs,
Yeah.
rather than just be bored in high school if they're really sick and tired of their high schools.
Yeah.
A lot of kids like the schools. They'll go, I mean, I have no problem with that. Yeah, they worry that, there'll be the abusive parent who just keeps their kid home and, never teaches them. I'd say that's going to be few and far between, that they're worried about the extreme case instead of looking at the extreme case of what's happening now, which is that half the kids are not learning to read. That doesn't seem to bother them for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah. But as long as they're in the seat, then that's the incentive.
That's right.
Well, so anyway, fascinating. I'm learning a lot today, so I really appreciate it. I'm trying to think anything else we haven't covered that you'd like to explore more in depth.
Well, I'd like to tell you what we're looking to do in the future and
Yeah, please
upcoming.
do.
So after we ran our couple of expos in Newport, New Hampshire, we had what I call a growth meeting. So I invited a bunch of people from all around the state to learn about how we did expos and what our mission is and what we want to do. And we got a number of volunteers to run their own expos. So we have local people running expos all around the state. In December, we had one in Manchester, one in North Country, and one in Peterborough. And next week, in fact, a week from yesterday, we're having one in Ware. Then a week after that, we're having one in Alton in the Lakes region. And then we have another one scheduled in May for the Seacoast and one in Bristol, with 3 more, just looking for dates right now. But we'll be running probably a good 8 or so expos this year, hopefully 12, but we'll see where we get.
Are we getting those up on the Free State Project calendar?
I have not thought of that. So yes, of course we are. That will be the next thing we do. Yes, I'll make it.
Well, then I guess to everyone listening, if you haven't, if you didn't take out a pen and jot those dates down, then be sure to. Jody's going to get that over to Chris Lopez, and we're going to get that up on the calendar. So you can check out fsp.org for that.
And now I'm learning to market. That's the big thing that I'm working on. I mean, I don't think of this as a Free Stater thing, but certainly anybody in the Free State is welcome to, to come to these, of course, and tell all your friends too, and especially in these regions. If you go to our website, you'll see edopt.org. You'll see that there's a map that you can see all the providers in your region and the opportunities. So you can it's kind of like a Google map. You can just zoom in and out and see all the possibilities there. So that's fun. And what we're working on, and I know I shouldn't talk about the future, but we want to get, well, one of the things we offer is consultations, kind of like these couple of stories I've shared, where we do one-on-one consultations with people who just don't know what to do, that they're frustrated with the schools. And so we've had a few people sign up for them, and we really need to market them more for people to know that we do this. But what we want to do is develop an AI chatbot to do these virtual consultations with people. So they might feel more private to people, and they'll get them just so far, and hopefully
Yeah.
even farther. But that's next on our list.
That sounds like a great project to talk with Matt Barney about, who's been a guest on this show, AI specialist. But anyway,
Well,
I'm sure
we have a great person working on it.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, we do. Chris Maidment. He's just been
Oh,
fantastic.
he's
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful. All right. I guess we have more AI specialists than I even
Oh,
realized.
yes, we do. In the last couple of years, since with AI just ramping up the way it is, more and more AI specialists. Kevin Tyson's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's our vice chair of EdOpt. And
Good
very
man.
helpful. Mhm.
Good man. I enjoyed we did a reading last year of play reading, William Shakespeare's Star Wars: Verily a New Hope. It was like a mashup of Star Wars and Shakespeare, and Kevin read for Obi-Wan Kenobi. He did an
Nice.
excellent job. So he's a
Perfect.
man of many talents.
He's got a good voice for that too. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the next big thing that we want to do, and we're starting to sort of get a network together, but really support this entrepreneurship that I'm talking about, to have people. So we want to create like a business in a box for creating a learning center. What kind of taxes do you need? Who do you need to file with, and so on? And here it is. Here's what you need to do. And then the network of people who've already started and are running learning centers and micro schools, they're willing to help people, to mentor them, to help them figure out what they need to do and how to do it. So that's one of the big things that we're going to set up soon too. So in the next year, there's going to be some big changes and hopefully big impacts on people.
Awesome. Well, hopefully next year, presuming we're still doing this show, I hope you'll come back on and give us an update. Any final thoughts you want to share with folks before we wrap up today?
Final thoughts. Come out to our expos. What else? Goodness. If anybody's interested in doing an expo in your area, reach out to me. And there's a contact us page on our website. If you scroll to the bottom of it, you'll see it. And I get the emails, so I just know you're sending them to me. You could also send them to info@edopt.org. But running expos is a big thing that we like to do. And again, we need the locals because they know their region. They know what opportunities there are there. They know how to advertise there. So, like for example, in Ware, they put a sign up on their downtown big digital display, or I don't know if it's digital, but that's advertised in Ware. And so anybody driving by will see it. I don't know that about Ware, but every local person does. So that's why we're looking for locals. And we're just getting so much support for it. It's been amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Jody, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing with folks the good work that you're doing and that you've been doing in education for quite a while. And I really look forward to having you at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. And I certainly hope that our audience really plans to get a ticket and come on out. And you can. So many topics will be discussed, including a lot on education freedom, with Jody Underwood's dialogue being one of the highlights there. So, Jody, thank you so much, and glad to have you on this week.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone, that's the show. Again, as I mentioned, New Hampshire Liberty Forum, April 24th through the 27th. Come on out, grab your ticket, nhlibertyforum.com. You can use that discount code Granite Gulch for 10% off. A gift from me to you. So come on out. And I should also mention, I can't believe I didn't mention this speaker who's coming to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, because right on this topic of education freedom, Corey DeAngelis, one of the leading proponents on nationwide on the education savings account model that was briefly discussed on this episode. He's going to be coming out to PorcFest. He's never been to PorcFest before, I don't believe. This will be his first time. So coming out to PorcFest, porcfest.com, pork with a C, not a K, right? It's a porcupine festival, not a barbecue festival, except that we will have some really great food at PorcFest. But still, pork with a K is not going to get you there. Pork with a C will get you there. So grab your tickets for Liberty Forum and PorcFest, Granite Gulch, to get 10% off. And I do want to say, as always, a thank you to our producer, Renita, for running all the elements of this show behind the scenes, making us look very good. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.